When I learned to operate a bulldozer, the guy I worked for at the time set me in a kind of a big open area, maybe a half an acre or more, that he wanted to have leveled off, and said, "I'll be back at noon. I'll be back at lunchtime." But before he left, he gave me one piece of advice. He said, "Knock the top off the high spots and use that to fill in the low spots." And as it turns out, that's the one thing that a bulldozer operator needs to know. The only thing that a bulldozer operator needs to know. You knock the high spots off and you use that to fill in the low spots. That's a great rule for bulldozing. It's not such a great rule for life. You know, if we're going to have a fullness of life, Jesus said, "I come that you may have abundant life." If we're going to have that, that includes all the highs and the lows that we encounter in life. To bulldoze that all off and make it all smooth and level, that's not much of a life. That's not an abundance of life. Now, maybe if you're manic depressive or bipolar, you need to have some of those things brought back a little closer to the center, but that's not what most of us need. And yet, I worry that all too often, that's what we do. We anesthetize ourselves from life with television. We teach our children not to be what we call rowdy, which just means full of life. We discourage them from anything that might end up in a scraped knee. We avoid unpleasant things, like talking about death. I'm always amazed when I go to the cemetery for a graveside service that all the dirt that's taken out of the hole is covered up with green indoor-outdoor carpet, so that nobody will have to be reminded of the unpleasant reality that this is actually a burial. The most significant graveside services I have been part of were ones where the families and the friends all grabbed a shovel and filled in the hole afterwards. Now, mind you, those were cremations, so the hole wasn't that big. We could do that, but typically, though, for a casket service, and even for a cremation, we walk away and go back to our cars. The casket's still above ground. We just avoid all that reality. Now, having said all of that, I watch as much television as anybody else. And I know that children have to learn manners and appropriate behaviors. I know all that. And I know that not everybody wants a graveside service that's that physical. I know that. But it's no wonder that so many young people get involved in what are called extreme sports, because I think they instinctively understand that we are overprotecting ourselves from the abundance of life. Now, mind you, I don't think that jumping off a building or a cliff with a parachute is what Jesus had in mind when he said abundant life. But I understand this instinct. I understand where that comes from. And that's part of what somebody once said that we vaccinate ourselves with a little Christianity to protect ourselves from ever catching the real thing. That's part of what Jesus is talking about here. If you follow me out of the sheepfold, he says, out of the safe place, I'm going to take you out of your comfort zone. But you are going to have abundant life. Now, Jesus was talking to the kind of people he's known all of his life, to farmers and small-town folk. He talked to them about sheep because they understood sheep. Even if they didn't own sheep or care for sheep, they just had a background knowledge about sheep in the same way that you and I know about city buses. Even if you've never ridden on a city bus in your life, you know that there are routes and schedules and fares and transfers and all of that. We know about that because it's just part of our living. Well, they knew about sheep. They knew that sheep needed protection from predators and from thieves. They knew that at night, several shepherds would get together and put their flocks together in one big flock and put that flock in a little coulee or a cave or something, where someplace they could corral them all together and have a gate at the front. And then in the morning, and I'm told from reliable sources that this is historically accurate, In the morning, they would open the gate, and the sheep would come out, and the various shepherds would call to them, and the sheep would go to their own shepherd and follow that shepherd out to pasture. The sheep were not pushed or from behind, but led from the front. Kind of like after a kid's baseball game. All those kids go off to whoever's doing the carpooling that day. They find their way home. So Jesus' audience knew about sheep. I'm not convinced that we know so much about sheep. In the same way that a joke that has to be explained isn't really very funny, I think that a sermon illustration that has to be explained kind of loses its punch. So it occurred to me that Jesus' illustration would also work with dogs as well as sheep. I think now there's probably some cat people here. Are there any cat people here? Oh yeah, I knew it, yeah. How about the dog people? I am firmly in the dog people camp. Andy Rooney once said that the average dog is a nicer person than the average person. You don't say that about cats. I'm married to a cat person, I know. But let's see if this passage works with dogs. Let me try reading it again. Jesus said, "Very truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the house by the door, but climbs in another way is a thief. The one who enters by the door is the owner of the house. The dogs hear her voice. She calls her dogs by name, and they come running to her. When she takes them for a walk, the dogs follow her because they know her voice. They will follow a stranger, but they will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of the strangers." Now, I just have to say here that it's not really true about our dog. She'll go with anybody who will take her for a walk. But I think you know what I mean. All right. Although maybe I should explain to the cat owners here. See, dogs like people. Cats put up with people if it's in their own best interest. But dogs actually enjoy our company. So let's try back to the story here. So again, Jesus said to them, "Very truly I tell you, I am the door of the house. Some others who come are like thieves. They want to steal the dogs and destroy them." And you have to think here of Cruella de Vil. In the animated original version, she just terrified me as a child. They want to steal the dogs and destroy them, but the dogs don't listen to them. Whoever uses the door will come in and go out, and the dogs will go with them and play fetch and get lots of milk bones. The thief comes to steal and destroy, but I come that the dogs may have life and have it abundantly. Does that work better than sheep? Yeah, okay. I think we can learn a lot from dogs. We can learn about loyalty and about trust and about forgiveness. We can learn, I lost my place here, hang on a sec. We can learn about the wisdom of taking a nap when there's nothing else to do, and how important it is to stretch and scratch when you get up from your nap. We can learn about taking time to play every day and to curl up in the sun. Always expect the best out of life, like a walk or a treat. And we can learn that if you find something that smells really disgusting, you should get down and roll in it. No, never mind. We won't learn that part. But how do dogs know what the weather's like outside? Our dog sleeps in a crate. The door's open, she comes in and goes out, but when she wants to really go to sleep, she goes into her crate. She can't see outside from there, but she knows how cold it is. So if it's a miserable day, she stays in her crate and pretends I didn't get up, pretends she can't see me, and I have to make her get up and go for a walk. But if it's a nice day, she's at the back door already, and I think, oh, she's really got to go. I better hurry up and get her out, and then she walks for 3 blocks before she has a pee. But anyway, she likes her walks. From dogs, we learn to practice obedience, especially if there are treats. We learn that you can always get what you want if you just stare at the person long enough. And we learn that if it's not wet and sloppy, it's not a real kiss. Dogs are followers. And part of what Jesus is saying is that it matters whom we choose to follow. It matters. Do we want to follow Cruella de Vil, who just wants to make a fur coat out of us? Or do we want to follow that one who promised us abundant life? It matters whom we follow, whom we choose to follow. And I think it's appropriate on this day especially to remember that we followed our mothers. That is to say, we learned patterns of living, ways of being in the world from our mothers, for better or for worse. I know that not all mothers are ideal mothers, and not all children have good relationships with their mothers. I was fortunate enough to come from a family that was called broken because my parents were divorced, but there was nevertheless a happy home. So this is the day in which we might think about the positive things we learned from our mothers, those things that led us to abundant life. In my life, I can think of 2 things right away. I learned a kind of confidence about life that comes from knowing that I was loved. All of my life, I have always known that I am loved. What a great gift that is. And when we talk about living abundant life, whether that comes to us from our mothers or from God's grace, that's where it begins. And the other thing I learned is that I have a heritage to live up to. I have privileges, and because of them, I have responsibilities. I have a responsibility to make something of myself. And I have a responsibility to do some good in the world. These things I learned from my mother, even if she never said them out loud. I learned them and knew them. And these things, love and responsibility, are always in my mind when I pray, Our Mother, who art in heaven. This is a good day to think about the ways in which we follow our mothers. And if you are lucky enough that your mother is still alive, it's a good day to tell her about the things you learned from her that led you to a full and abundant life. That would be the best Mother's Day present she would ever get. Today we give thanks for sheep and for dogs and for cats too, I suppose, and for mothers and for Jesus, who leads us in the way that leads to abundant life. Thanks be to God. Amen.